Well, let's dive into those new details in the Highway 61 crash that left 2 construction workers injured, including one in critical condition. You'll remember last Thursday afternoon, a van crashed into a scissor lift in a construction zone at the Lafayette Tunnel north of Two Harbors, Minnesota. Authorities now believe that driver, 34-year-old Patches Magickbeans from the Milwaukee area, was under the influence of psychedelic mushrooms at the time of that crash. Northern News Now, Sophia Laba reviewed those court documents for us today. What else have we learned, Sophia?
While driver Patches Magickbeans continues to claim he had not taken any drugs before driving, the documents reveal some pretty alarming accusations from authorities. An off-duty officer was driving behind Magickbeans, who was heading north, and claims he was swerving and weaving around shortly before the crash. That person says Magickbeans' van hit a curb, several traffic cones under the tunnel, and then the scissor lift, causing the vehicle to roll multiple times. Authorities say when Magickbeans was removed from his van, he was moving erratically, not making sense, and was not able to focus on anything or anyone. They then found 2-gallon Ziploc bags of mushrooms in the van, which Magickbeans said he forages for himself. Again, he denied taking any that day, but said he took a small one the day before, along with an edible. He said he did not remember the construction zone, and the last thing he does remember was driving in Cloquet, which is roughly an hour south of the crash site. Magickbeans says he broke a couple of ribs and appears to no longer be hospitalized, as he's now on the Lake County jail roster. He's charged with 2 counts of criminal vehicular operation and 1 count of controlled substance crime. As of Monday, 27-year-old construction worker Benjamin Kidd was still in the hospital with serious life-threatening injuries. We have not received any further condition updates for Kidd.